Hello and welcome to another episode of Historically Marked. This is another cemeteries edition, and I am at the northeastern part of Provo, Utah, at the Eastlawn Memorial Cemetery. It's high up on the hills, and I'll show you three notable graves here, plus something that I found really cool here. So come along with me, I'll show you. Here we go. As you're coming through the cemetery, yes, you'll be going up a lot of hills, windy ones that is, and then there's this little burial spot you'll see. And I parked right there. There's about maybe a dozen marked graves here, but it is not known, at least not to me, how many interments are here. But there is one famous interment, and that is Clark Gable III. He, of course, was the grandson of the late movie Hollywood screen legend Clark James Gable, September 20th, 1988 to February 22nd, 2019. And he had his grandfather's good looks. Now, I do not know why he is buried here specifically in Provo, but Clark Gable, his grandfather, had one child, and his name was John Clark Gable, and of course that is his son resting right there. But he had, the grandfather, the screen legend Clark Gable, he had not lived to see his son being born. He was 60 years old when he passed away in 1960, and John Clark Gable later moved on to marrying a gal named Tracy Yarrow, and they later divorced, and they had at least two kids. One of them, of course, Clark James Gable, the other one Kaylee Gable, who was an actress. But Tracy would remarry, and the stepfather of Clark Gable III would be the Chicago singer/bassist Jason Scheff, who would sing lead on a few of the group's hits like Will You Still Love Me and Hard Habit to Break, among many others. But Clark Gable III was an actor and businessman. He was born in Malibu, California, and he passed away in Dallas, Texas. Now, he was an actor. I mean, he had a few minor roles, but he was mostly known as the reality show host of the syndicated show Cheaters from seasons 13 to 15. And as far as the business side of him, he owned a boutique men's fashion and surfing line of clothing and accessories. The website was clarkgablespygear.com, and it was also an online electronics store. But in 2011, Gable was arrested for shining a laser pointer at a police helicopter in Los Angeles. He pled guilty, sentenced to 10 days in jail, 3 years of probation. And before his death, a couple of years before, or maybe a year and a half before his death, Gable had one daughter named Shore. But Gable passed away at the age of 30 at the Texas Health Presbyterian Hospital on February 22nd, 2019, after being found unresponsive earlier that morning. He overdosed on many drugs, including fentanyl and oxycodone, among others. So may he rest in peace, Clark Gable III. And here we are approaching the grave of singer Bobby Engemann. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He was one of the founding members of the 1960s vocal group, the Lettermen. He formed the Lettermen while he was attending Brigham Young University here in Provo in 1959. They first signed with Warner Brothers Records, but they found success with Capitol Records, and they had a string of hit singles throughout the 1960s, such as The Way You Look Tonight and When I Fall in Love. They also had one of my favorite medleys, Going Out of My Head and Can't Take My Eyes Off of You, both are covers. They were segued together. But they had many top 40 hits. They performed over 200 live concerts and 32 albums on the Billboard 200. In 2001, they were inducted into the Vocal Group Hall of Fame. Engemann was the first to leave the group in the late 1960s, and while he wanted to concentrate on his growing family. But he was also an elder in the Mormon Church and spent many years in the alumni insurance program for his alma mater, the BYU. He died at age 78 from complications of pneumonia after suffering heart bypass surgery. And here he is interred next to his wife. Bobby, or Robert, lived from 1935 to 2013, married on August 18th, 1961. And Betty, who lived from 1936 to 2010. May they both rest in peace. And lastly, this is the gravesite of George and Olive Osmond, the patriarchs of the Osmond family. Yes, the entertainment family. They had 9 children, and I'm sure most of you know the two most famous, arguably, the children, Donnie and Marie. But George was a World War II vet, and he married Olive on December 1st, 1944, as it says on here. And George was a devout Mormon. He was born in Etna, Utah, and he passed away here at the age of 90 on November 6, 2007. But he worked as an insurance salesman, and he worked in real estate. But he would also teach his sons how to sing, like the Barbershop Quartet. They would eventually land a gig at Disneyland after catching the eye of Walt Disney. But they did not become famous until they performed on the Andy Williams variety show. And throughout the 1970s, they had a hit-making streak with songs like One Bad Apple and Yo-Yo and Down by the Lazy River. And of course, a lot of them had solo careers, Donnie most notably. Like he had Go Away Little Girl in 1972. And then like years later, he also hit the top 5 with Soldier of Love. And then Marie had a successful solo career on both the pop and country charts. Jimmy Osmond had Long-Haired Lover from Liverpool. But they were a success in their own right. However, by the late 1970s, after the Osmonds variety show was canceled, the family fell into bankruptcy. And there's a TV movie, I don't know if it's available on any streaming service, maybe it's available here on YouTube. But it came out in 2001, and I remember watching it on TV. It was a TV movie called Inside the Osmonds. It's a biographical look at the rise and fall and rise again of their careers, and it featured all members of the Osmond family at the end singing on stage, including those two. But it's definitely surreal standing at the grave of the parents of all the Osmond children. They have a number of grandchildren. Now, if you look at a picture of Donnie Osmond, like I was at the Las Vegas airport recently, and he was headlining at one of the hotels there, and yeah, the dude never ages. He's in his 60s and all that. But Donnie and Marie did take up residence for a long time at Las Vegas. I mean, there's so much stuff I can mention about the Osmond family. But here is the final resting place of George and Olive. And I do not know if any of where their kids are going to be buried, but it may be here or it may be somewhere else. So now we're going to visit the Easter Cross, and here's a plaque or historical marker, talks all about it. I'll try to whittle it down. Built 1939, restored 2017. The Provo Easter Cross was built as the anchor for yearly multi-denominational Easter sunrise services, which were conducted for the first time in 1933 by the Provo Community Congregational Church. In 1939, stonemason Nathan Dixie Hyatt was commissioned to build a 10-foot tall cross of native stone on the foothills of Y Mountain to designate the location for these annual Easter services. As time went on, thousands attended the yearly event, which continued through the efforts of various religious communities and Provo city officials. Sunrise services at the site of the cross came to an end in 1951, but the Easter Cross remained a popular hiking destination until it was broken apart in the early 1970s by vandals. Boo. Once again, in its new location, the Easter Cross stands as a symbol of both Christianity and unity in the Utah Valley. So now we're going to go closer to it. These steps are kind of wicked, although I can use this railing too, although it's a little shaky. But the view is pretty nice. Look down on the city of Provo and all its residents and the mountains. All right, now we're getting closer to the cross, and it looks to be there's a plaque in front of it and a few grave sites, or a couple rather. I'm glad they've kept this place up really well, like it's just newly mowed. And here it is, the Easter cross. And it's pretty much the same thing, pretty much the same plaque. However, it has a thank you to all the people who helped and donated. But very nice. And so while I'm here, I don't know how many people are up here looking at this cross, but yeah, they'll likely see me or the little guy up here. All right, I am Jason. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of Historically Marked. I am in Eastlawn Memorial Cemetery in Provo, Utah. Signing off.